Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Edna White, your host of Keeping It Real on Purpose. And we are so excited to be here today. I am so excited. And audience, you guys know me. I get excited about everything. But this guest right here is going to give me the fortitude to really embrace a subject I don't like talking about, but I'm going to love talking about it with him. His name is Stephen Graves. He has so much to offer to us today, and he's going to talk about politics. But I want him to introduce himself because there's too much. There's too much. I might miss. Stephen, I'm sorry, Stephen, not Steve. Stephen, how are you today? And welcome to the show.
I'm excellent. Thank you for having me. I feel blessed and honored to be a part of the show during the holiday season, I know. So it's been fantastic. To introduce myself to your guests, obviously, I'm Dr. Stephen Graves. From the Oklahoma State University Department of Political Science and the Center for Africana Studies. I hold a PhD in political science from Howard University in Washington, D.C., a prominent HBCU. So I'm very proud of that. And my mom is too. So I want to make sure I shut that out.
You
My
better
main
say that.
That's right. I do a lot of, again, main research in Black politics, Black political voting behavior, and
Okay.
political ideologies, American government, and blessed to be here. I'm really thankful and grateful.
Hmm. I am so glad to hear that you have so much experience in all those areas. I really want to take the first thing that you took apart, that you said first apart.
Okay.
Share with us being part of Black Africana Studies. Share with us your experience with that.
It's always been a kind of an up and down kind of relationship. Obviously, as a Black person going through, grad school and undergrad, my parents really kind of raised me to be somewhat conscious of Black history and kind of where we are. And so growing up
Right.
in predominantly white areas in K through 12 and not having access to that, by the time I got to college and really got to kind of study and do what I wanted to study and learn about Black people and where we were
Yeah.
from. But when I got into, my career in academics, with
Ooh.
2016 and the way they kind of
Ooh.
the critical race theory kind of thing kind of took off, and now we're in
Yeah.
that DEI kind of thing taking off in some southern states and some Republican led places, really attacking diversity and equity, or really kind of
Hmm.
attacking critical race theory. This, what do you do with Black studies, what do you do with Africana studies is always kind of in the in the back of our
Right.
consciousness, especially in then a predominantly white institutions as far as higher academics goes. It's always that, what's the value of Black politics?
Right.
The value of
Right.
Africana studies? Like,
Right.
what are we teaching Black people about Black people? Why is it important? Is it only for Black students and everything else is? And so there's always a lot of that. And, I've had to, battle a little bit and a lot with white colleagues, kind of thinking that our scholarship isn't the same, it's not as valued as important enough, kind of a
Ooh,
niche,
that's
kind of an area. And so we're always fighting for that validation amongst our white colleagues,
yeah.
why Africana studies is important, why we should be doing Black studies.
Absolutely.
And in white, again, in white areas and white states, I was at University of Missouri before and now in Oklahoma, when they're public land grants. So like the legislature and the people have a lot to
Mhm.
say about where the funding goes. And so
Yeah,
you in
absolutely.
conservative areas and they don't want to fund Black studies, they don't want to fund DEI, there's no money for it. And so we're always trying to, do more with less. Is always a big
Right,
part of a thing. And
right.
then there's always this kind of unshared burden on our Black students. So Black students really look for Black studies, Africana studies to kind of be a home for them.
Mhm.
They, looking for Black faculty, they want to, have someone to, kind of bounce off of that looks like them. And so there's always this little uneven burden of our service too, to kind of Black History Month events and MLK
Right,
events. When there's something that,
right.
happens on campus or off campus that concerns Black students, we're always the one to call. So, there's always that little uneven burden as far as, kind of service goes, but I couldn't imagine doing anything else. And
Yeah,
I've just always tried to
that's
work hard and
great.
strive to make sure that
Yeah,
Black studies and Africana studies are important aspects that everyone should learn about, including our white colleagues and our
that's
white
right.
have just as
That's
much
right.
at stake in learning about Black people as Black people do.
That's right. That's really good. I will say that when you started talking about this, I came from Alabama with my family here. I'm on Long Island, by the way,
Okay.
and I moved into a predominantly white neighborhood, and I think I was the first white black that had braids that was from down south that came. And then there was another young lady that was with me, and her name was Joyce. I never will forget her. She was Black African, it was different. So we both came and they were like feeling our hair. And it was just such a culture shock to me because I was a kid. I was 7. I'm
Yeah.
going to school. I'm like, everybody's like, ooh, like I was this new thing. I want to ask you, and I got 2 questions. I really do. I do. And I want to ask you, one is there true diversity, equity, and inclusion? Is there true, the way that, let me say, the way that they present it in the business world right now?
No, I think there's a
Okay.
couple of things.
Okay.
One, when we talk about, especially with a recent affirmative action case and it being
Okay.
and it kind of going away, right? So a lot of times when
Right.
people when people thought of diversity and affirmative action, they originally
Right.
thought of Black people. Okay, that
Yeah.
was at its real an original intent. It was about getting Black people into opportunities that they previously didn't have.
Right.
Post Brown v. Board, post civil rights movement, that
Hmm.
affirmative action, and the scare from whites about affirmative action was Black people getting into colleges, Black people getting
Yeah.
into jobs. And then when they originally thought about diversity, they originally thought about Blacks and African Americans having opportunities
Yes.
and everything else it is.
Yes. Yes.
Post Jesse Jackson in the 80s and the kind of rainbow coalition and this kind of need for what we now call multiculturalism and everything else,
Yes. Uh-huh.
diversity is really taking on a different term. So now
Right.
diversity just means anything that's not white heteronormative. So
Oh,
now
that's good.
so now,
That's good.
the Asian Americans are now part of what calculates as diversity.
Yes.
Hispanics and
Yes.
Latinx are now diversity. They've even expanded it up so much to where diversity now means diversity of opinions as well. So
Oh,
getting conservatives in there or getting someone who believes in communism in there, like those now qualify as diversity. So where diversity once
yeah.
meant Black people, it has now been umbrellaed up so wide. So now where it really can kind of mean anything. And so when we
Yeah.
see diversity numbers and like, well, how come there's still all Black people there, but they call it diverse? Well, they've got minority women in there and they've got
Yeah.
Hispanics and they've got
Right.
other groups in there. So the Black population really doesn't see much improvement in everything else this and other groups do, and they call it diversity, even though that the initial scare and the initial kind of push is about, oh, we're getting it, Black people opportunities. And the same went with affirmative action, and studies have shown
Right.
that the biggest benefactors of affirmative action have been white women. But
You're
but
right.
they,
You're
right?
right.
White women have been the benefactors of affirmative action, but they'll make it seem like, oh, this is all about Black people getting jobs, and now I've got a Black
No,
boss and a
it's
Black
not.
manager and
No.
everything else it is. But
Mm-mm.
that's not really it kind of at all. And so, trying to, overcome that adversity and that kind of stereotype of when people talk about diversity and equity and affirmative
Mhm.
action, they're no longer just talking about Black people now. It can virtually mean every
Right.
LGBTQIA is now diverse. So
Yeah.
they bring in a white male who is part of that community, and that now
Mhm.
qualifies as diversity. And so
Right.
it really has kind of taken on a life of its own.
A whole, it started, like you said, like, yeah, focusing on us, and then it just branched off. And um, that brings me to the second question. Now, I always divert back to my childhood. So, um, I remember being taught about Martin Luther King, um, uh, um, a few others. There's 3 others. It was 3 others. Um, what's his name? Oh,
Frederick
oh
Douglass,
my goodness.
probably.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, and Moses. What can I think?
Marcus
Oh my God.
Garvey.
Yes. Oh, that no, that wasn't
Oh,
even brought up.
that's way too extreme.
That
That's
was not brought up. Don't even say that.
yeah,
The Underground Railroad.
of course. Harriet Tubman.
That was the 3.
Yeah.
But I never, again, I was young. So when I felt some type of way when my white teacher was telling me about these 3 people,
Mhm.
and I bring that up to date now. Am I okay, or should I be better than that if I'm being taught about us by another race? Am I okay with that? Should I be okay with that, or how can I embrace it if I'm wrong?
I mean, there is an issue of that. We've had that
Okay.
issue before in some of our introduction classes when they're taught by
Okay.
whites. And some of our Black students are like, little uneasy, like, that
Yeah,
openness is
and
being
I
able
am.
to
I
really
am.
kind of say.
I'm
And
easy
of,
now.
and
Yes.
of course, like you said, and traditionally through K through 12, we've only been taught slavery, Underground Railroad, MLK, Barack Obama, and that's pretty much as the kind of crux
Well,
of it
that's
right
what you
now.
got. I didn't get Barack Obama. I got not Marky. I didn't even get Marcus Garvey until I was in
Oh
high
no.
school.
Yeah,
No,
Frederick
he was
Douglass.
like
Yeah,
he was
slavery,
banned.
Frederick Douglass.
Marcus Garvey was banned.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
Civil
so
War.
yeah, it was
And then let's move on right into the civil rights movement and
yeah,
MLK. And so
yes,
the problem
yes.
with that is that yes, there are so many more important, prominent people that contributed so
Okay.
much to Black life and African American life and where we are.
Mhm.
And on top of that, what we've been taught and kind of learned about the people that we are, is tainted in many ways as
Oh,
well,
absolutely,
because it's
totally.
it's a narrative and a story that they really want to tell,
Right.
and it's usually one about peace and reconciliation and good, happy Blacks who have kind of
Yeah,
contributed to
that's right.
the
Yeah.
American story, and there's not much
Yes.
attention in there, whatnot. Because the history really of African Americans, especially politically and in this country, is really one of polarizing kind of polar opposites. There's always been this kind of faction that says we can make this work in America, right? We're just going to hold the founding fathers accountable. We're going to stick to this Constitution. This thing can work, okay? But then there's always has been this other branch of the Black population who says this is never going to work. They don't like
Yeah.
us. They don't want us. They have shown us that they don't want us here and they don't like us. This is not going to work. So
Yes.
when you've got people like Frederick Douglass, who's trying to hold Lincoln accountable, and he's saying this
Mhm.
country owes us. There is Martin Delaney and other people out there going, Black people, we got to do
Yeah.
our own thing. This thing is not going to
Yeah.
work. They don't like
Yeah.
us. Let's build our own institutions and let's kind of just, and kind of do our own
Right.
thing. And that is
Right.
controversial, even, further down the road, post Reconstruction and everything else it is. Booker T. Washington, W.E. Du Bois is saying, hey,
Mhm.
let's fight for Black inclusion and
Yeah.
be involved in higher
Yeah.
education. And there's another branch saying, like Marcus Garvey saying, Black people, do your own thing. It ain't gonna
Do
work.
your
They don't
own
want us. They don't
thing.
like us. It's time to build our own
Yes.
thing. And that's what Marcus Garvey and Booker T. Washington were saying. Black people, build your own institutions, separate yourself,
Yes.
and build your own economy up and do your own thing.
Yes.
They don't want us here. They don't like us. It's time to
Yes.
take care of self, and we're going that way.
Yes.
Even when you get into that's in the 1910s and 20s. You get to the 50s and 60s, same kind of a thing, right? You've got Martin out there saying, hey, we're going to hold the country accountable, justice,
Yeah.
equality, all those kind of things, right? But then you've got Malcolm X and NOI and my brothers out there saying
Oh,
this
a
is
whole
not going to
polar
work.
opposite.
This is not
Yes.
going to work. They don't want us. They don't like us.
Yeah.
They have taught us over
Yeah.
and over again that they do not want us here.
Yeah.
Don't see us as equals. Let's do our own thing. And so there's
Yeah.
always been that conversation in the
Yeah.
Black community as far as what our role
Mhm.
in America is. We're either going
Yeah.
to, make this thing work with white people and be part of the system, or we're going to come
Yeah.
to the realization that it's just not going to happen. They don't want
Yeah.
us to be part as equals. They never saw themselves governing alongside us as equals throughout all of the history. They just never fathomed. Even the
Never.
founding fathers never fathomed the idea.
Mhm.
Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, they all had the idea that once slavery was over with, we're shipping these Black people back to Africa. Right? That's why they purchased Monrovia and Libya, right? They purchased
Yes.
land, colonized and said, listen, this is never going to work for a plethora of reasons. Either, and the two reasons were either one, and this is probably a big one, whites were never going to get over the fact that Black people were once slaves and were once beneath them. They were just never going to get over that fact. And the other part
Right.
about it was Blacks were never going to get over it either. Right? We're never going
Right.
to get over the thing. So the
Never.
best thing we can do once freedom is gone is get these Black people out of here. We're going to send them to Monrovia, send them to Libya, and get them out of there. But all
Mhm.
these Black people said that's not going to work. And Martin Delaney was one that said, we're not doing that. You're not going to colonize us back to some other place, or else it is. And so they were like, hey, during that time, 90% of Blacks were in southern states. And so they said, hey, just give us these 7 states down here in the South where we're 90% of the population, and we'll
Mhm.
leave us alone. They weren't going to give us
Right.
that, obviously. So then they said, okay, well, how about we just migrate to the Caribbean where it's, somewhat in our
Yes.
environment, still got Black people there. We'll migrate there. White people weren't going to let us go there. They were, again, slave rebellions and fugitive slave laws. They're capturing us at the border. They're not going to let us go else anyway. So that conversation has always kind of been there. And then and Martin Luther King, towards the end of his life, started to come to the same kind of realization. One of the conversations that he had with Harry Belafonte before he was assassinated, of course, by the
Mhm.
federal government, we have seen, is that he articulates to Harry Belafonte. He says, I don't know if I'm sending my people into a burning house. I I might be wrong on this one. This integration thing. Maybe I'm on the wrong stage on this thing. And last but not least, in that same kind of notion, that March on Washington, his last little address, that was about anti-capitalism. That was about
Yeah.
economic
They
equality,
watered that down. They
reparations.
watered that down. They watered that down.
Absolutely. That
Totally
march
watered
was
that down to something totally different.
That was a march for
Never told
economic
us that.
freedom and justice. It was the march for economic
Mhm.
freedom and justice. He's talking about there's a check that white people owed black people still. This is what the current
Mhm.
reparations movement is kind of hitting at.
Yes.
MLK knew that whites were getting an unfair advantage. They owed us for, for our
Right.
freedoms that they were getting. And that
Sure.
economic push was to get that back, an anti-capitalism movement there. And that was, of course, the end of his life as he kind of started pushing towards separatism, anti-capitalism, and kind of make it work.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been, one of the big things, NOI, Malcolm X, Black Panther Party,
Yeah.
they all had this
Mhm.
idea that, separatism, and separatism is different from segregation. And this is the
Oh,
argument that
absolutely.
they're trying to make, right? Segregation
Mhm.
is white people telling blacks where you can and cannot go,
Right.
what you can and cannot do. Well, separation is blacks having the power to say for ourselves where we'll
Right.
go, where we won't shop,
Mhm.
where we won't live.
Mhm.
And those are two
Right.
different things. And so what
Right.
they're
Right.
advocating is for separation, and that's totally different from
Mhm.
segregation. And these
Yeah.
arguments continue to play out through, American history and Black life.
Absolutely all over the place. All over the place. Every time you turn around.
Mhm.
And you're sparking my heart because I'm a baby boomer. That's my time.
Okay.
And I will tell you that I didn't learn any of this. I lived in Alabama. You
Mhm.
know, I lived in Alabama, was raised by my great grandparents. My mom was working up here in New York. When I finally came up here, it was it really was a culture shock. I was like, my great grandfather was one of the first free slaves in Alabama who owned his own property, was taking his whatever he farmed to his own to the markets. So he was doing a lot of that. I saw all of that like that. Maybe that's why I got the entrepreneurial spirit. But I saw all of that, and then when I got here, I was like, I was totally confused. I didn't know how to act, and I always say to everybody, "So glad I was born where I was born and saw what I saw. Because if I saw this, I probably wouldn't be alive right now,
Right.
because my mouth would have got me a whole lot of trouble, right?"
Mhm. Yeah.
But what you're sharing right now is so exciting to me. To hear what you know. And I want to, I was feeling this stuff.
Mhm.
Every time I have a guest on, audience guys, I always say it's for me, it's for me, it's for
Mhm.
me. But this is really for me because I feel this way, what you're saying, and I don't know how to put it in words, and I just go with my feeling. I
Yeah.
go with it. So I wanted to say this to you and ask you this question. So where we are, the town always kind of puts on these gets us all together, right? And pulls every leader from the communities, pulls us together, and they do this like a Kwanzaa, or in February do like a MLK walk. The last time I went to one was 1990 something, and I had brought my Sunday school children, about 30 kids there, and I felt some type of way, and maybe you can help me.
Mhm.
And I was walking them in, and I remember seeing like they had like all the white dignitaries, the officials, the politicians sitting up front that gave us this money to give us. And I'm saying this facetiously, that wasn't really true. Watermelon and chicken.
Mhm.
And so I hear them, and I'm sitting on the side. I hear them saying, "Look how beautiful they look." And it disturbed me. I was like, "Are we on like a parade or something?" And when I heard them kept talking like that, it disturbed me. So I kind of got up and I was like, I grabbed the kids and said, "Everybody hold hands." I had 30 kids. We walk out. So they're like, "Where you going?" I was like, "I won't parade around for anybody." Like, and I never went back. I To this day they ask me, I don't go back. I feel that if you're going to do that, give the money to us. Let us as a community decide what we're going to do together, instead
Absolutely.
of parading at your front, in front of you at your town hall,
Mhm.
or where you want us to be, and you guys are sitting like you're at a concert.
Right.
How do you feel about those types of, um, you know, um, I guess things that they do, whatever that is? But how do
No,
you
I think
feel?
you're absolutely right. And that happens so very often. A couple of things. I would really kind of say two things. One is the kind of pageantry about what you're talking about when they
Right.
invite Black communities into these places to give some kind of performance or discuss Kwanzaa and everything else like that. It's really about pageantry, but it's also about absolving them from having to actually do anything real tangible to change the material condition of
Thank
Black people.
you.
It's like
Thank you.
we do this in place of doing what you actually, need and what you actually,
Right.
to prove your life. I think I hearken this back to the Juneteenth thing a couple of years ago when they decided to declare that a national holiday. Black people never asked for Juneteenth to be a national holiday. That
We
election
never
came out.
did.
We talked about
Never.
we talked about police brutality reform. We talked about criminal justice reform. We talked about voting rights. We talked about reparations. We talked about student loan forgiveness. Those are 5 things that Black people were talking about during that whole time. And now nobody
We
said anything
never
about
asked for
Juneteenth.
Juneteenth.
They didn't address
No.
any of those issues, but then they turn around and give us Juneteenth and they say, see,
Right.
we gave you something.
We gave you
Thing of,
something.
we gave
Yeah.
you something, right? And they want us to be
Yes.
celebratory and be grateful and thankful for having that. It ain't even,
Right.
but the holiday, everyone gets the holiday off. So it's not even just celebrating Black people. Everyone's getting that day off. So it's not
Thank
even
you.
so it's not even
Thank
benefiting Black people directly and exclusively. So
No.
that's part of
No.
it is they want to absolve themselves from actually having to actually do anything. And it's really just
Right.
about kind of the pageantry of it and just celebratory and being able to kind of gawk and make Black people feel like they've actually given them something
Right.
non-material because they don't want
Yeah.
to actually address and look at real
Oh, I
material
love
issues.
this. I love this. I love it. I love it. I love it. So I will tell you that that's how I feel. And I haven't taken all the education that you learned, but I felt it. And I was like, I know I never go back. Even when they asked me now as an adult, I was like, no, I'm
Yeah.
not being involved. I cannot parade in front of them dressed up. I can't do it. Why? Give us the money for our communities. Give us that money. Let us do what we want to do. And then I don't see Kanara. If we are celebrating Kwanzaa, I don't see Kanara. I don't see us doing things on the day that we're supposed to be doing it on. We do it
Right.
on the day that you want us to do it on. So
Absolutely.
you can, like you said, be absolved from your guilt or whatever it is.
Absolutely. While also
And
simultaneously feeling good. And this is another aspect about it, is this, the white savior complex too, as well. And in that,
yes, I say that. I didn't even
we
know it
know
was a
what's better
thing.
for you guys than you do. We know what's better for you guys than you do, Roast it is. And this is part of the thing that Black people have been advocating for, is like you're saying, who knows about Black issues and how to better improve Black material life than we do? But so we can solve
Exactly.
our own problems. This is part of the
Exactly.
conversation before about this ain't going to work.
Exactly.
We can solve our own problems our own way, with our own
Hmm.
leadership and our own
Yep.
character, values, and experience and culture. But instead, what we find, of course, is like you've noticed, is white people want to not only cut the check, but they want to be in leadership roles too, and they want to have
Yeah.
some say and be able to dictate rather than just
Hmm.
letting Black people with the resources solve our own problems in our own kind of a way.
Right.
Instead, they
Right.
want to have some say and they want to donate money and
Right.
feel like that then gives them the ability to say, we're not
Right.
only helping, but
Exactly.
use our ideas into as well.
Right. Yeah. And I always say that to. Do you see what they're doing to us? Like,
Mhm.
we're arguing with each other about being on their board
Right.
when we have the ability to be on our own board and bring that to our own community. Why would you want to be on their board? It
Yeah.
doesn't. You're not getting paid. You can do the same exact thing in your own community. Come together and do it for your community. Why would you want to?
Yeah. Or they
Well,
want to, or they want to donate money and be on our boards, or they want to donate $1,000 and be like, but we want a seat on the board. We want to be a voting
no,
member
they don't even
on
know
some kind
here. They
of
don't
board
want to
and
do that.
stuff like
No, I'm
that.
telling you, Stephen, they don't want to do that here. They want to induct themselves and say that they're like some kind of ambassador or something
Oh
in
yeah.
our chambers and things like that, but don't want to pay. They don't want
Yeah,
to pay.
of course.
Like
Okay.
that. They want to be like that kind of thing. So
Mhm.
no, I think I'm through with that. I think I'm
Yeah,
really through that. I
absolutely.
I we we had in the past, and I just recently actually, where they started to divide the black line, because one area of our town has like a district, I think District 6 maybe, has the majority of black people. So they started to chop us up, chop us
Mhm.
all up and give us to this part and give us to, redistricting. They started to redistrict our voting areas, which
Absolutely.
brings me to what I really want to talk about is black
Yeah.
political behaviors. And I
Mhm.
know that you know all about this. I was furious with people that didn't show up. And I'm always furious with people that don't show up. I scream at my kids. My kids are old. And I'm like,
Mhm.
you're not voting? Well, it doesn't make a difference anyway. Yes, it does. It does. I'm telling you, it does. Tell us about these behaviors. Please, just please.
Well, I mean, well, the thing I would say is that both are right, and participating in local
Okay.
elections, absolutely, especially where
Okay.
city council, superintendents, police,
Right.
police forces, and sergeants, those local
Right.
offices that are part of local elections, absolutely, those votes
Right.
definitely are important, definitely matter, and same with
Okay.
policy legislations and referendums that come up.
Okay.
That they come up in local elections, absolutely. Now, national
Okay.
elections, it gets a little bit different. It gets a little bit dicey, especially when you're talking about the
Okay.
electoral college and swing states. As you see, every presidential election,
Ooh.
they're really only following those 9 states in the middle: Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. There's these swing states in the middle, and elections
What are you telling me? Say
that the
this. Wait,
elections
hold on.
really
Hold on. Hold on.
the
Hold on. Hold on.
election
Hold on.
really
Hold
comes
on.
down to those.
The whole if I could rewind, I would. Say it again.
The national elections, presidential elections, really only come down to a handful, about 7 or 8 states, and the rest of the states don't really matter. The swing states in the middle, where you see most presidential candidates spend the majority of their money, places like Ohio, Wisconsin, Indiana,
Right.
Michigan, occasionally Missouri, North Carolina, Virginia. Those are kind of swing states that can kind of go either way. But for 80% of these states, most of them
Oh
are
my
already come up
goodness.
predetermined, right? Like those main
Oh
southern
my
states that voted
goodness.
red for the last 20 years, they're going to continue to vote red. You see places like California and Washington State and Oregon and New York, they mostly vote blue. So you're really kind of like carving up, these big states kind of in the middle. And those are usually where these elections, national elections, really kind of get determined. And so that's why you see,
Oh my
advocating,
goodness.
how those black votes are kind of getting carved up in those places, because those are really where national elections really come down to.
Got you.
You don't see a lot of presidential candidates go to all 50 states, especially because some of those states have already predetermined, right? Tennessee is voting Republican, Alabama is voting Republican, right? And so you don't really kind of see black people then advocating for Democratic candidates in those states trying to swing votes. Until Bill Clinton won Arkansas back in the 90s, that had been red for decades. And ain't no Democrat run Arkansas since. But he happened to be the former governor of there, so he was able to pull Arkansas.
Okay.
But that's
Okay.
traditionally a red state too, as well. So these national elections really kind of get in there. But on the other hand, I would also then say that, to the notion about whether you vote or not, can you still kind of complain? And I always advocate absolutely. I mean, because whether you vote or not,
Okay.
you're still a tax-paying citizen. They're taking our money,
Okay.
okay, and they're using
Okay.
it. It's like going to
Yes.
a It's like going to a restaurant. I don't necessarily get to choose what's on the menu, but if my food comes out and I don't like it, I still get to complain because I'm paying. And so elections, right? So the
Absolutely. Absolutely.
elections are kind of the same way. And another thing about it too, I was always advocate is, yes, they're important, but improvement of Black life and our material conditions is on a daily basis. You just can't show up every Super Tuesday in every election and think that the civic duty and improving our lives stops and ends there.
Mhm.
The majority of improving Black life really starts at home and starts locally. Loving up on your
Yes.
family. Do you attend PTA meetings? Do you go to student council meetings? The rest is when you're for your children, and
Yes.
what's your opinion there? That's really kind of at the heart of where improvement kind of comes. But we kind of get into this idea that I'm showing up on Tuesday and vote, and now my job is done, and let's see what happens with the
Right.
Black life. But there's just so much more to
Right.
that. So again, I would harken for that you're both kind of right, that these local elections are important and everything
Okay.
else, but we can't
Okay.
get so bogged down into thinking that that's the main way to change our lives, when there are things that happen daily in our family life, in our communities, that are much more important, and
Got
that
you.
contribute
Got you.
down the line for real.
Yeah. Got you. I love what you said about you spending some time, if you have children, in the PTA.
Yes.
Because I was an advocate for that. When I walked down the hall, they knew exactly who I was.
Mhm.
I was not playing. I was
Mhm.
not playing.
Believe that.
What am I coming here for? And I advocate that way, even for my children. I was when I had my children, I was going into a district that was all white.
Mhm.
That did not like my kids were like with blacks. A
Yeah.
handful of blacks, maybe 5 or 6 blacks.
Mhm.
And I stayed in the school. You're not going to do just anything you want with my children. No, you're not. You're not going to just. I wanted to review things, and it's so important these days and ages for our young people that are having children or have children that are school age to be involved in the school. Don't just let the school raised them. One
Absolutely.
thing I hate, one thing I hate is that when you don't take your children to physicals,
Yeah.
but you let the school give them a physical. I hate that.
Don't
And
do
I
it.
don't know why. I'm like, don't do that. That they can do anything to don't
Yeah.
no, that's not allowed.
Yeah.
You have when you start handing over your child like that, that tells
Mhm.
me now you're handing them over indefinitely, no matter what they do. You're handing them over. So I like what you said about that.
An
It
adult should
starts at home.
always be in the room during those physical, like during physical exams. So if they're trying to
Yes.
get them away at school and you're not able to make it, you opt out of then you can just opt out, or unless you're able
Yeah.
to attend, but you never let them test or do any kind of medical, Black people know obviously throughout our history, you never let them experiment or do any kind of medical
No.
exams on
No.
children without there being an adult around to ask questions and
Yes.
to oversee.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally 100% agree. When I they asked me about that when my kids are small, I was like, all I thought about is remember seeing movies of the military men going in and just being examined any
Yeah.
kind of way, and I was like, oh no, not my children.
Tuskegee. Yeah, the
Yeah,
Tuskegee
I thought about
experiment,
that. I was like, oh no, like you're taking
right?
their DNA and doing whatever you want with it. Oh no,
Yes,
I'm not there. Oh
Henrietta Lacks,
no.
absolutely, Henrietta Lacks, and they're
Yeah.
pulling her DNA out of there and using it for polio.
Yes.
No compensation, no heads up, no
Yes.
nothing, just
Yes.
experimenting on Black people, most it is unknowingly. And so, again, when COVID came out, they're wondering why all these Black people are skeptical of COVID. Well, we've seen what you've done to Black people before. And so we're,
Absolutely.
shooting us up with what?
Absolutely.
There's always going to be that skepticism of African Americans and the
Yeah.
medical system because of that
Yeah.
history of the Tuskegee experiment and
Yeah.
Henrietta Lacks and the HALOC gene.
And I was working for an agency and they always wanted me to help them dispel that myth that there's nothing to be afraid of. And I always said no. And I don't know why. I guess I'm just somebody that kicks against stuff like that. But I was like, no, I think everything that we're feeling, because I don't say they, I say we, because we
Mm-hmm.
are feeling it,
That's right.
is valid. We're
Absolutely.
feeling that because it's valid, and I would go back and say, well, remember, well, that's not now. I said, how do we know that?
And
How do we know?
here's the thing, and it's still happening now, and we've seen this more recently in the research about Black maternal care, and you've seen that
Yes,
news out lately, especially
yes,
when Serena Williams came out after she gave birth to her first, and she came out and said, "I almost died in there." And right,
yeah,
and they don't know how to treat Black pain, right? They don't need it
no,
tougher, they can handle it better, and everything else it is. So when someone is rich and is famous and prominent, Serena Williams comes out and says Black maternal care is a disaster. They don't
yeah,
understand Black women's bodies. I almost died in there. Then it finally comes out and say, "Oh my goodness, they are, Black maternal care is at an extremely dangerous rate and twice the
that is
death
correct.
of everyone else." Like they don't understand and aren't treating Black women when they come into the doctor and say, "Hey, this doesn't feel right," or "This is more painful." Like, "Oh,
Yeah,
you're going to be okay. Black people can
yeah,
handle a little bit more
yeah,
pain. You don't need as much."
yeah,
Like, no,
yeah,
so they're still doing it to this day
yeah.
as far as
To
how
this day,
Black people are being responded to and treated in
yeah,
medical facilities.
absolutely. I went to the doctors and it was concerning my cholesterol, and
Mhm.
the doctor said to me, he asked me this question. He said, "Are you on any medication?" I said, "No." He said, "No medication." This is how he did to me. He did like,
Mhm.
"No medication." I said, "No." He said, "You almost 60. No medication." I said, "No. I do everything I'm supposed to." So they did the blood work, and as he came back, he says, "Well, you have problems breathing. I said, "Yeah, because I had a car accident and had collapsed lungs." And I explained it. I said, "If you
Mhm.
would have read my record, you would have known that. So, and then he says to me, "Well, your cholesterol is two, I guess, notches from whatever number. I forget the number.
Mhm.
Um, that we have to give you medication." I said, "Well, what? I said, "What?" I said, "According to my history, or according to like, what is it according to?" So
Yeah.
he says, "Well, it's according to our I forgot what they said, the thing that they do, the according to our whatever they do, and they did all these people, 100 people or whatever, and this is what
Yeah.
they come up with." I said, "Well, how many were black and how many were Caribbean, how many were?" And I started to break it down. He's like,
Yeah.
"No, that's besides the point." I said, "No, no, it's not." I said, "Because
No.
you're talking to Edna." I was like, you took an Edna. So Edna needs to know by her lineage how many of these people that were surveyed, that's what it
Yeah.
said, survey, how many of this survey that were like me.
Hmm.
And so he says, well, it'll save you a heart attack in 10 years. I said, 10 years? I said, 10 years? I said, so what is it doing to my body in general? Oh, he said,
Right.
yeah, by the way, you have to get your liver tested every 6 months. I said, what? I said, no. I said,
Yeah.
no, that won't happen. And they were arguing with me. And then they would send another doctor. You got to go to this doctor now since you're refusing this. I said,
Hmm.
God, and finally, the last doctor I got to, he says to me, you gotta take, I'm gonna give you another pill. I know the other ones didn't work because you responding negatively. Literally, it tightened my body so bad my son had to come get me
Yeah.
out of the bed. And I was like, there's no way I'm taking this medicine. There is no way. I had muscle spasms everywhere. I
Yeah.
was like, I don't care. Second, third, fourth, fifth pill, I'm not taking it.
That's
And
right.
so he's like, you got to take this. I said, no. What you should do for me is send me to the less invasive, maybe
Hmm.
genetic testing,
Yep.
maybe nutritionist. But you
There you
haven't
go.
suggested anything. You went straight to the pill.
Yep.
And I said, if I'm having an allergic reaction to this, I'm going to have a allergic reaction to the third pill. I'm not taking any of it.
Hmm.
So they're very. I have to advocate for yourself, but
Absolutely.
what I'm saying to you is the doctor was so mad at me. I
Yeah.
couldn't believe how mad at me he was. I
Hmm.
said, he's like, well, just have a good day. I said, well, you know what? When you walk out this door, plan not to be my doctor anymore. Plan
Right.
not. Don't. I said, you're not for you to be mad at me because I'm advocating for myself is beyond me. I
Yeah.
don't get it. And
Hmm.
I said, so when you walk out the door, you're not my doctor any longer. Find me somebody else.
That's right.
So advocating for yourself, it's happening now. It's
Yeah.
happening so much now. I can't even understand it that
And there's
they
a
would
lot of
go
more
to the
holistic people are finding out more holistic, natural ways that they can
right.
to get healthy instead of like you said, have you thought about a nutritionist? A lot of the time this stuff is in our diet and things that we're consuming and putting into our bodies that we're not knowing about.
Right,
And believe you
right.
me, if you've made it this long without being on prescriptions and being in pharmacies, you'll be all right at this day and age. And there's other ways of going about it, and there's no
Yeah,
good intention
yeah,
on getting on those things now.
yeah. And I think that's I felt really good about like advocating for myself. And my friend said, keep going because they're gonna send reinforcements. I was like, are you kidding me? Are
They're
you
going to
just
make you
kidding
get
me?
on some kind of
They're
prescriptions.
gonna
They
send in
want you in the
reinforcements.
database. They want you somewhere in that
Yeah,
database for taking something. They want to get you on something.
yeah. And I said, "Are you kidding me? Are you just kidding?" And so and now I'm at the gynecologist. I'm telling her what happened to me. She goes, "Well, we're finding that blood, cholesterol has to do with heredity, and it's not necessarily high or low." I said, "Yeah, because one of my doctors who is Greek, his
Hmm.
blood pressure, his cholesterol is three something, and his doctor says he's fine."
Right.
But why is it I'm not fine?
Yeah.
I don't get it. I don't get it. It's two times mine. I don't
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
And so she said, yeah, I think, and I'm at a gynecologist now, and I
Mhm.
will say that I'm at a gynecologist. She's saying it. I don't really advise people to not do anything, but if you feel like shouldn't take it, don't take it.
Amen.
That's what she said to me. She's on the other end of my mouth, okay?
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. That's
So I
empowering.
knew. Yes, it's empowering. I was like, okay, then I'm doing the right thing because I'm telling her is because she's asking me anything different, and so I'm telling her. She goes, "Well, we're finding now it's heredity. It's not really dangerous as we
Hmm.
see it." And she's explained to me, because I'm not telling you not to, but advocate for yourself the best way. And
Yeah.
that made me feel like really good. I was like, okay, so
Mhm.
this is it. All we're saying, audience, is advocate for yourself, guys. Do
Absolutely.
that for yourself. Fight for yourself. Fight for your
Do your own
children.
research. Do
Your
your own
children. Yeah.
research, and look
Yes.
into things yourself. Always look into things, for yourself instead of always just taking what you're told at face value.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So how can our audience get some more of you? Because I'm gonna be bugging you. I got your email now. You are on
Absolutely.
blast with me.
You
How
reach
can
out to
they
me
get in touch
anytime.
with you?
Absolutely. But again, I can be found at my own website, www.graviology.com. I'm on Twitter and Facebook as Dr. Stephen Graves, PhD. So I can be found out there. And I always enjoy having these conversations. So you reach out to me anytime about any topic.
Absolutely,
But you can
absolutely.
find me on those avenues and on those media platforms.
Great. That's terrific. Well, I'm falling in love with you already. Like you are like you're giving me information I've never known. And I know that if I were to talk to you any longer, I'll probably be too stuffed to move because you have so much information. Audience, you have to get in touch with Stephen Gribbs. You really do because I think he has a wealth of information and I'm going to stay in touch. So, is there
Absolutely.
anything you can give our audience, last words, what you can give them to on any subject that we talked about, because we talked about a lot.
I know the end of the year is coming up. It's a big election year in 2024. I will just advise your audience, especially be careful out there in this next year coming up. It's a big election. These supporters are going to be on big edge, and they're
Yes.
going to be very bold this year. They see this election as the end all be all for that side, for that
Mm-hmm.
Trump side, and for those anxious sides. So be on our best lookout, support one another,
Yes.
love one another, hang in there tough. It's going to be a very, very dicey year. Be careful of the rhetoric, be careful of the provocation on the other side. They're taking this one very seriously.
Right.
So be careful out there and be mindful and support one another and love one another for sure, because we're going to need it
Absolutely.
between now and November.
Absolutely. I want to thank you for being here, Stephen. You have been a wealth of knowledge and total excitement. I love it. I love when a person could share something that usually is boring,
Mhm.
exciting. And I know that you've done that today for me and my audience. And we're going to have you back, and we're going to have you in other platforms that you can share this wealth of knowledge to our communities. Thanks again. And this is Edna White, your host, saying goodbye for now, and my guest, Stephen Graves, saying, we'll see you next time.
You bet.